Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Joshua Zapperzan, the owner and president of Odax Ventures, and welcome to the Manitoba edition of Canada's podcast, where we talk to the entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in the prairies. Today's guest is Grant White. Grant is the owner and portfolio manager of Endeavor Wealth Management, where he and his team focus on creating smart money for their clients. Grant has been recognized as a top performing financial planner by many organizations, including on an international level, and was voted the top advisor in Canada under the age of 40. Grant is a proud member of the community, dedicating many hours of his time to local charitable organizations, including the United Way, and has been a mentor for a number of local entrepreneurs as well. Grant, great to have you today. Welcome to Canada's podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to share some insights with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Let's start by tell us a little bit more about yourself. How did you get into the wealth management industry? Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and that this was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say this. I knew this was always what I wanted to do, but I did grow up in it. So my dad was a financial planner for many years, like 35 years approximately, and he's been retired for about 5 years now. But I kind of grew up in the industry a little bit, and so certainly that had an influence on me and what I wanted to do in my life. But I got into it I got introduced to it because of that. I didn't get into it because of that. Let's put it that way. I mean, really I got really excited about working with people and wanting to help people to ultimately live better lives and do things better. And that's why I got into it, because I saw the impact I could have as a business owner, as a professional in working with people on this level, helping them to maximize out their lifestyles and things like that. And so that's ultimately why I got into it. But I started about 15 or 16 years ago in the industry as a whole. And we started Endeavor Wealth Management about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, back in 2019. And so we've just taken a bit of a different course since then, but it's been an exciting ride, to say the least.
That's awesome. So tell me more about Endeavor and the business of Endeavor and kind of day-to-day what Endeavor is.
Yeah. So at Endeavor Wealth, like we focus on working with, primarily like, we work with a lot of business owners and professionals and people like that, but really we're a boutique wealth management offering, wealth management company that focuses on working with, people on a broad range of financial needs. I would say that anybody who's looking to have like a fully coordinated financial plan, if you will, or wealth management plan, that's exactly the type of people that we work with. Often, it's people with more complicated financial situations that we simplify those for them. But yeah, we really believe in a specialized approach to advice. And so I say one of the things that makes us unique is we've developed a complete ecosystem of advice offering around an individual's, our customers, our clients' financial needs, and that's, I think, what really makes us unique in terms of execution and coordination.
Love it. Why Endeavor? Is there a meaning behind choosing that name when you?
It's funny because like you go through. I mean, I did anyway. I would really recommend taking time to choose your name before you just settle on it. Like, don't just pick the first name that comes to mind when you're creating your business, because it can mean so a lot. It doesn't have to. I mean, if you don't care about names, like, I guess that's fine. I've always just believed if you're going to do something, you might as well do something that's impactful and meaningful. And so why Endeavor? Well, I went through a broad iteration of names before settling or choosing Endeavor, I should say. I've always been a bit of a space nerd, space fan. And so, it just happened to be watching. I'll have to give my wife credit, Sam credit a little bit as well, because, I was watching this documentary on the space shuttles, and, she basically said, well, what about Endeavor? And I'm like, after the space shuttle Endeavor, and I'm like, oh, that's really neat. So I started doing research on the space shuttle Endeavor and why the name was the name. And of course it takes you back to like, Captain Cook's like sailing ship, the Endeavor, the HMS Endeavor, and so on and so on and so on. And so you ultimately just have this broad history of this name, this grand history. But really what it means to me is that, for every Endeavor vessel ship there was, I mean, in my mind, they were in search of a better way of life for people. And they were there to enhance the human experience, the human life. And so I look at what we're doing here is the exact same way. So it's a hidden meaning. It means to kind of adventure and do more, to be more. But at the same time, it's there to do that for all people. So that's kind of the broad history of the name Endeavor. But that's why we chose it in the first place.
Love it. No, I'm glad. I think it's cool how there's businesses and names can have that hidden meaning behind it. And it's important, I think, especially for entrepreneurs to do that and to take their time. So yeah, that's awesome to hear.
It can be inspiring, right? I mean, you can, in one word, you can have a name that actually means something and says a lot about your company or your business as a whole. And so anyway, yeah, it's I think you should take the time to pick a name that actually means something.
Love it. What's something about your industry that our listeners may not know? Is there a life or business lesson that you've learned from your work within this industry and space that you think can be applied elsewhere that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think this industry. So I'm in a very traditional industry in wealth management. It's dominated largely by the big five banks in the Canadian industry. And so I think what's really interesting about that is the transition that this industry has gone on. And in large part, you think about like traditional like brokerage, for example. Our industry was created as a selling arm for manufacturing of products, or even like stock brokerage, like so bringing companies to market and then selling those stocks to people that could be investors. And there's a huge amount of money that manufacturing and brokerage firms made off of that type of business. But that's changed a lot. I mean, in the last couple of decades in particular, the idea of advice became a thing. And it's not completely there, but the idea of advice and actually adding way more value to people versus just selling them products, that became a thing. And so like many industries, there's constant change. I mean, the one constant is change in everything, right? And this industry is no different. So there's been a lot of change towards more of an advice platform, and it's not there yet, in my opinion. But that's created the opportunity for independence and for businesses like mine, where we can go out and make a real difference. And I think that there's a really great opportunity for businesses like mine, where we can be essentially a speedboat amongst ocean liner tankers that are the larger companies. And you see this all over the world in other industries as well. But it's an opportunity that's been created that we're taking advantage of, where we can focus in on client experience, customer experience, and make a difference in people's lives that way, and still provide the best specialized advice that's available out there to them on all facets of their needs. And so I think if there's something that people didn't know about our industry, it's that, yeah, it's gone through this big iteration. It's changing, and it needs to change more, in my opinion. But you have way more options than just the big banks out there, and there's a few businesses out there like mine that are looking to make a difference in it.
So what is that long-term vision of you for Endeavor, and what do you think your company is going to look like in the future? Do you see yourself expanding into areas beyond Manitoba or across Canada?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I don't get into anything unless I'm going to go big on it, to be honest with you. So, I absolutely. I mean, my idea, there is a model for financial advice that's out there that already exists, and I think it is the perfect model. But if you look at the multifamily office model, and that's just a fancy way of what we call a firm or an office that handles the ultra wealthy people out there. That's the model that I think everybody deserves to have. You're getting specialized advice around your taxes, around your cash flow, your investments, your real estate, insurances, all of that stuff, everything built into one. Your philanthropy, that model is there. But the problem is, it's reserved for the people that have like ultra wealth, and to me, there's nothing inspiring about, taking rich people and keeping them rich. I mean, granted, we work with a lot of wealthy clients, and that's the business model that exists today in my industry. But if I'm looking down the road, and you want to say like 10, 15, maybe 20 years down the road, what I think needs to happen is that we need to, there's a lot of companies out there trying to democratize the investment, like the access to investments. I think we need to democratize advice, and good financial advice in particular. And I think if we're successful at doing what we want to do, then that's what's going to happen. So it's kind of like the Tesla model of things. If I'm going to like give a reference that people can imagine, like, you start off with a Roadster that costs like $500,000 or $250,000. Then you build like a sedan that's 150, and then slowly you get your way down to like a sedan that's like a $35,000 vehicle that more people can afford, and even cheaper down the road, right? And I think that's exactly where my industry, or where we can take this, if you will. So the best way I describe it is a scalable multifamily office that goes national, and has platforms to democratize the world of financial advice.
Love it. I mean, entrepreneurs are built to made to think big. So I think that's awesome and awesome to hear. Why Manitoba? Why do you think Manitoba is such a great place to build a business and to start a business in?
Well, I mean, first of all, because the people. I mean, I love, I don't even think Manitoba is an underdog. I think it's like an underrated place overall, and I've heard so many like kind of more well-known local like entrepreneurs here say things like, you don't settle in Manitoba because of like our great natural resources. Like we don't have like oil, like booming oil and things like that. It's not like Calgary, it's not like Alberta in that sense, and it's not like a lot of other places. But you do stay here because of the people, and there's so many stories out there where people come here for a bit and then they never leave. I mean, yeah, everybody's heard of our winters, but you know what? One, it's not as bad as mostly Winnipeggers say it is. But really, you stick around here because of the people. And I think from an entrepreneurial perspective and building businesses, having a good support group of people around you is critical, and to doing that. I mean, in my mind, nobody's really self-made. I mean, we all owe it back to the community around us to be successful. It's given us the opportunity for that. And if that's the case, then there is no better place to start a business. In my mind, there's so many people here that are looking to help each other out, to get each other off the ground, and just provide that guidance when needed. And so I'd say in a nutshell, that's why Manitoba. But I think I also like that underrated aspect of it is that we can do big things here. We can do very difficult things here, and we can do it on a global scale. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think Manitoba is super well positioned to do that.
So if you were to start it all over again, and if, for example, you just moved to here to Winnipeg, but this time you don't know anyone, knowing what you now know, what would you do and how would you start? What would you do to start all over again as an entrepreneur here?
Yeah, I think I get back to like, the people are generally the what makes the difference for a lot of other people out there, especially starting businesses. The first thing I would do is start to build a network. And there's a lot of great organizations here. The Associates would be a really good one. That's a group of professionals and business owners that get together on a regular basis. There's the Young Associates, which is an affiliate group, which I know you're aware of. So, those are two great groups, and there's many, many more. There's a great startup community here too, with lots of people that are, again, willing to help each other out. So, the first thing I would say is get out and meet people, because you never know what comes from that. Often you'll find I've met some people in meetup groups, like that we just found keen interests, or similar interests, I should say, and then they become friends out of that. I've been to networking groups, and now I'm in friend groups, where we have WhatsApp Formula One groups with friends that I've met just through like, a networking event. So it's amazing where things can take you. And then on the business front as well, you never know who you're going to meet, never know what the ideas are going to be shared over, coffee or dinner or a glass of wine sometimes. And you never know where that takes you. So connect. That's the name of the game early on.
Cool. Well, I know you're a busy entrepreneur. You have your wife, Sam, young family. Happy first birthday to JL, by the way, which is awesome. I want to talk to you a little bit about your routine as an entrepreneur. What does kind of that first hour look like for you when you get up in the morning? Do you have a specific routine or ritual to get your day started or to get you motivated?
Yeah, well, you mentioned JL. So she turned 1 yesterday. So my routine has changed a whole lot in the last year. I mean, I'll tell you, like, my routine used to be, I'm an early riser. I love the morning. I actually just don't like sleep in general. Like, but
most entrepreneurs don't.
Yeah, like if I didn't have to sleep, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm an early riser, and I'm also a late sleeper, if you will. Like I don't like, I like to stay up late because I think I seem to get a lot of creative ideas like around 11 o'clock at night for some reason. I constantly have like my notes on my phone. Like I have my phone next to my bed all the time. I turn on like do not disturb because I don't want any notifications, but I need my notes so I can type something in there. But anyway, my routine in the morning. So this is my alarm still goes off at 5:30. It used to go off at 5:30 because I get up and I want to go to the gym. And that I have good intentions of going to the gym every morning still. But often, when I look at my weeks, some of the best times I get to spend with JL are in the morning. So she gets up around 6. I get up around 5:30 to 6 every once in a while. And I get to, wake her up every morning basically and spend an hour or an hour and a half with her. And so that's my schedule's changed because of that. But that's the best way to start my day, because I mean, anybody that ever wants to question, if you ever want to test how passionate you are about doing what you're doing, go have a kid, go have a baby, and the amount of time that they take, and in my experience, frankly, it's done nothing but enhance what I want to do. I want it more because of her, and I want it more because of the world that she's going to live in. And so, I think if you ever want to test your passions out, have a kid. You might find that you're not as passionate as you thought about it, which is fine too, right? But in my mind, and I'll credit my dad this because he told me this was going to happen, that if you're passionate about something, it's gonna enhance that. You're gonna want it that much more, and that's totally true in my case. So I love spending that time with her. It's a good reminder of why I do what I do, every single day. And then I usually around 7:30 I'll start getting ready, and I'll head into work and head into the office to get things rolling on.
I know you enjoy to read. What books are you reading right now, or audiobooks, podcasts, and any recommendations for our listeners and entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I have a few different things on the go always at once. Like I do a couple different podcasts, and I'm reading some really interesting stuff right now. So I just finished a book. As you would know, but nobody else would know, that I'm a huge Richard Branson fan. And so sometimes when I'm in like a bit of, not a lull, but if I'm looking just for some fun reading, I'll go back to like a Branson advice book or something like that. So I just finished reading um, Like a Virgin, which is like his like business advice for the stuff you don't learn in school, basically. And I'd never read it before, so I thought it was a really good book. It's just like people had asked him all these questions and he was answering them. So there's entrepreneurs from all over the world that he was basically answering the questions from.
Wow.
So I'm just going to tell you a quick story, because this took me so back to why I'm doing what I'm doing, and why I started it in the first place. Because I'm reading the book, and he had a question from somebody from Nigeria who had started I think it was a kid, and they started a lawn care business.
Mhm.
And anyway, so he's giving advice around like, even just a simple lawn care business. But it took me back to when I was a kid. And this is so funny, because I remember I started a lawn care business when I was a kid. I hopefully, if anybody listening, I just did the air quotes.
Yeah.
And my idea was, I really hated cutting lawns. I really hated it. I lived in a place called Headingley, just outside of Winnipeg. We had 2 acres, virtually all grass. And anyway, I hated it. And I figured to myself, I don't know how old it was. Let's say I was 8 or 9. I figured, though, that if I hate it this much, there must be other people that hate it as well. And so there's a problem that I can solve. And I hate it, but if somebody's going to give me money to do it, I'll do it. I'll solve that problem for these people. And so I did up these flyers. I did up these flyers. I was starting this business. And I said, and even at that time, I was thinking, like, how do I make this the best customer experience possible? Like, I want them to do nothing. I'm going to show up. I'm just going to take their money. I'm going to do great work. And this is going to be awesome. I like in my flyer, I had, we will bring our own lawnmowers. We'll bring our own equipment. You don't need to do anything. So my dad sees this flyer. I was printing it on our old IBM computer or whatever it was at the time. And I'm printing it off. My dad takes a look at this flyer. He's like, so, Grant, where's this lawnmower that you're claiming to have coming from? I'm like, oh, Dad, easy. We got one in the shed. He's like, you don't have a lawnmower. I have a lawnmower. So he had major concerns about the amount of miles, I guess, I was going to put on his lawnmower, basically. So the Grant White lawn care business got shut down pretty quickly.
Did you even cut one lawn?
Well, I cut my own, but that's it.
That doesn't count. Yeah.
So no, we never got off the ground. But I was just thinking about it the other day, because it's interesting how things happen when you're a kid that shape the way you do things when you're older as well. Or maybe you find that you did things then that are still the same way today. And in my case, I was just thinking about, man, I always had this passion for like trying to solve problems, one, for people, but two, make it the best experience possible for them. And that was the whole point. Like, I thought, like, oh man, we're going to be putting people out if I have to use their lawnmower. Like, we should bring our own lawn. We should make that. And so I just draw parallels to what we do today in wealth management, and how we try to make this the best experience possible. And we take it from, like, we study the best in the business at it. Like, we study Apple, we study Disney, we study the absolute best in the business world at this stuff to try to make this enhanced and great experience that people will it'll be memorable, but they'll talk about it. And when I was reading this book, I was just reminded about that it's like, that goes back to when I was a kid even. And so I love hearing those stories from people, because I often find, like, the stuff the people's first memory in our world of dealing with money or dealing with like something in their life and how it formed like their opinions on business or whatever is so interesting. And so anyway, I just drew that parallel. But so that's a book I just finished reading, and actually now I'm reading a book on sustainable design and sustainable building, which is another just passion of mine.
Very cool. Love that. Love that story too. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
So kind of shifting away from work, how do you relax and not think about work at all? Is it through reading, or what's kind of your favorite activities to do outside of work locally here in Manitoba?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're really lucky here because we have a lot of great outdoorsy types things to do. I love getting out of the city, and if I can get to the lake and do some hiking or get on a boat with somebody, that's always fun. I actually find, like, I love traveling, and I think everybody within their means should travel as much as they can. I know it's not for everybody, but for me, it gives me such perspective on the world and such perspective on life, and so we try to travel as much as we can. The pandemic's obviously been very difficult for that, and we've put off some items because of it. But I've really enjoyed. I really enjoy getting to see how other people live, and so traveling is number one thing for me. But even just getting out and hiking, getting out into nature and quiet your mind for a little bit, I think that's always good. And of course, reading. I don't read as much as I'd like to. I try to read a little bit every night, basically. But reading's so great as well. Just to it's amazing the things you'll come up with, like if you can quiet your mind a little bit, and just the creative thoughts you can have, and even just listening to what other people are going through or other entrepreneurs have gone through in their lives. I think it's amazing. It's a very comforting thing to know that Richard Branson has gone through difficult business times. Let's put it that way, because
For sure.
as entrepreneurs and business owners, we all go through that at some point or another. And we only see these like mega like CEO celebrities at their peaks. We only notice them because they're there. But you never know that Nike almost went bankrupt 7 times or 10 times or something like that. You never hear those stories. And so I think it's always comforting to read those stories as well. It gives you good peace of mind.
Absolutely, for sure. So if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you like to be doing as a profession?
Oh man, such a good question. Because I would say this. I'm not necessarily passionate about wealth management. I like it.
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily passionate about it though. I'm passionate about helping people to live better lives. And that's and we often talk about what's your why, and Simon Sinek has really made that famous, right? But what's your why? And then really that's why I do what I do. And so I would find something else that's allowing me the opportunity to do that. And in fact, as an entrepreneur, I'm kind of like I don't know if I'd call myself a serial entrepreneur. I kind of think of myself that way, but I'm already looking at what are the other business opportunities, and what are we doing to what other areas can we help make a difference in, under this Endeavor brand. And so I think I would do exactly what I'm doing. I just do a lot of other things. But I often think my friend Atem will laugh at this, because he's an architect, and his process it's very similar to how we do things for people with money. But I think I love design. And as I mentioned, I'm reading this book on sustainable design right now. I love design. And I think I would probably have gone into like either architecture. I'm a terrible drawer though. I think there's no chance. I think I'm creative, but nobody would understand what my designs were. So that would have probably been a limiting factor in that career. But I would probably gone into architecture, or I really find like civil engineering, like the people that think of like better ways to live in cities. I always find that fascinating. I met a few people like that in Australia, in that profession in Australia, and like some of the ideas like seem like just so cool, like to think of like how you help a person who can't see like cross the road better, stuff like that.
It forces you to be creative and come up with super cool things.
Yeah. So I always felt like I would get into something like that. I mean, to the point where I'd love to have like an applied science, a Batman reference. I'd love to have like an applied sciences company someday, where all we do is think of like things that can help people to live better lives. But yeah, I would definitely find something. I would always be involved in something that helps people to live better and live more the way they want to.
Love that. Do you have a favorite word, quote, or sentence that you like to use with whether it just be for yourself or with your staff and your team at Endeavor?
um, I'm just thinking, we have a wall here that we call it our Be More wall. And every day somebody puts a quote on the wall. It's never the same person, and sometimes you get to later in the day and somebody will notice that there's nothing on the wall that day so far. And then they'll put something up. And so I'm a huge fan of just like a few phrases or whatever that can like make a difference in somebody's day. And we purposely put it by the back door, which a lot of the people here will leave out of the back door on their way home. And with the whole point was like, if you can get a smile or something like that as the last memory that somebody has as they're leaving the office here, I think that's a pretty powerful thing. It's a pretty powerful moment. But as it relates to, there's two things that come to mind to me. Like I'm always like, hope is one of my favorite words. I'm an optimist, as you probably tell from this podcast so far, but hope is if you have hope, you can pretty much do anything. And so hope is, if I had one favorite word out there, it's hope. But I think if I had a phrase that I had to pick, it's that a rising tide raises all boats. And that's something that it's been in the back of my mind throughout my entire career as a professional. And that, if we're good at something, that we should use that to help other people out, because at the end of the day, helping other people helps you, it helps the entire community. And that's that whole rising tide impact that you can have. And to the point where, I've even named an endowment fund that my wife and I contribute into after that. So it's the Endeavor Rising Tide Fund. And it basically says all you need to know about what our hopes are. So that would be it.
I think that's awesome. So what's one piece of advice that you would like to share with entrepreneurs across Canada?
Everybody says like, just do it, and I agree with that. Like, I think it's like, you've got an idea, you got something you want to do, like you have to take leaps, you have to make jumps. One of the things that I have always been a fan of doing, and it's probably in the nature of like, I like to plan things out. I never like to react. You respond appropriately to the situation you're in, but never react, because a reaction can go either the way you want it to, or a lot of cases it can go the way you don't want it to, just because it's like a simple twitch, or a quick decision. And you have to be able to make quick decisions. But the best way in my mind to make quick decisions in business is to have run through scenarios ahead of time. And so what I try to do is, before I get into any sort of investment or any sort of business that we're either starting up or buying or taking over, I like to run through at least 5 scenarios of what could happen over the next, at least 3 years, 5 years, probably. And no matter what happens in that 3 to 5 year period of time, we won't be reacting, but we'll be able to respond very quickly to it. So for example, when we started in 2019 here at Endeavor Wealth Management, I believe it was 5 scenarios that we had been run ahead of time. And none of them accounted for a pandemic. I'll be honest. Like, none of them said, hey, we're going to have a pandemic in 2020. But I did account for things like a financial crisis. And I did account for things that can happen in this industry. And even like the worst case scenarios. And because of what happened in 2020 with the pandemic, it actually gave me so much comfort, because we saw things like stock markets around the world dropping 30% in a month. And the quickest drop ever that we've ever seen. Having the scenarios well thought out offered me the opportunity to make a very quick decision and know exactly what we're going to do. It's like, we're in scenario C now. Okay, go with scenario C. And because I'd thought through it, and none of it works out perfectly, but at least it gives you kind of a framework to work with. And so we ended up looking at that situation where a lot of people in our industry, a lot of our competitors might have been a little bit concerned. The revenues had just dropped maybe 20%, 15% or so. We were heavily investing and knew that was growth opportunity for us because of that scenario. And so that's what we've done. And so I think having those types of scenarios thought through ahead of time can really help you. There is analysis paralysis. That's the counterpoint to that, right? And if you're doing too much analysis that prevents you from making a good decision or a quick decision, then that's a problem. But thinking through the scenarios ahead of time should be used as a tool to allow you the opportunity to make very, very quick decisions and confident decisions.
Love that. I think that's great advice. Before we kind of wrap up our conversation here today, Grant, I've got 3 quick rapid fire questions for you to kind of wrap up the conversation. So are you ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First one. What 2 items would you take with you if you were shipwrecked on a deserted island where all of your food and water needs were taken care of?
Good question. My Kindle and a picture of jail.
Love it. If someone gave you $50,000 today to start a business, what business would you start?
Oh man, I would start Endeavor Applied Sciences, and we would make things like massive smart technology that helps people.
Love it. Last one. If you could choose one song to play every time you walked into a room for the rest of your life, what song would you choose?
Oh, easy. AC/DC, Shoot the Thrill.
Good one. Good one. That's awesome. So, Grant, finally, how can our listeners get a hold of you? And is there anything that you'd like to add before you leave us today?
Yeah, so easy to get a hold of me because, social media and websites and all that. So go to www.endeavorwealth.ca. And you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I'm on all the platforms. But yeah, go to our website, you'll find me there. And or you just Google me, Grant White at Endeavor, and you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, Grant, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing more about Endeavor, your story, your entrepreneurial path. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, thanks so much for listening to Canada's podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe to all of our channels to get the latest podcasts from entrepreneurs across Canada. We'll see you next time.